As always, we're going to do our normal housekeeping introductions and walk through that. And please, if you're looking to ask a question, just simply stick it into the chat screen, and we will try and get to the questions after we get through the review portion. But other than that, we'll walk through and hopefully get as much information as we can to everybody and get everybody updated. So let's give it one more 5 seconds or so before we get started. Okay, welcome everyone, and welcome to the SG REOT winter update call. It's been a trying time. I think everybody's well aware of what's been going on in the industry and in the construction world and the interest rate world, and of course our global unsettlements in different parts of the world. But we do want to give you a full update and hopefully set your mind at ease with our projects. If nothing else, giving you some good background and a better position to be able to ask the questions that as a unit holder we expect that you'd want to ask. So we will bring in our GP partners and our trustees as needed today. As you can see, they're all on the call and their videos are turned on. As we've done in the past with our calls, this is a fairly standard PowerPoint presentation. We just do the updates into it. And I think even last time in the fall, I would have said the same thing. I haven't had to change my opening remarks almost at all. We picked good markets at a good time. We did not project anything in our performance to account for the COVID effect, what is now the long COVID, which we refer medically for people who, of course, suffering. But long COVID has also now got almost a double meaning. That it's hanging around here in the affecting the economy and affecting supply chains and everything else. We are seeing some of that settle down. We can talk about that in a bit in the presentation. But all in all, the migration pattern is still there. The shortage of homes is still there. Attainability is questionable with high interest rates. We all know that. But people have to live someplace. So at this point, when we give our updates, you'll see us pivoting a little bit with some of our messaging and addressing the construction challenges and cost challenges in Ingersoll with that project. So nothing really new on the introduction. None of our partnerships, of course, all are the same. So you've seen this many times, but that's full disclosure. Every quarter, we leave that in the presentation. Trustees, and there's no changes with our trustees, independent or operating, myself and Randy being on the team that's operating. Of course, Scott, Derek, and Christopher are on the call today, being on the independent side. Our back office support through our company here at Century Group, the business services doing books and records, BDO doing the advisory, and really providing some goalpost accounting advice to make sure we stay within what we need to do to be compliant and of course get past our audits when we do have our audits coming up this spring, as we do every year. And I think we noted this in the last meeting. I don't recall 100%, but Miller Thompson in Guelph, a national firm, shut down their Guelph office, and that left the lawyers who associated with the Miller Thompson office kind of with a decision to make whether or not they wanted to move to a Miller Thompson office in Kitchener or Toronto or another city, or move to another law firm. And so Robert Graham and Michael Henley, who we've used extensively in our projects, have moved respectfully to two different firms. One with Robert Graham going to SV Law and Michael Henley going to McKenzie Lake Lawyers, both of which are, again, well versed in our project, well versed in our what our offering is, and our relationships maintained with them. We're just simply, they've changed their logos, but they still have the same level of expertise and experience that we relied on when we got things going. The business plan, we did have an original business plan that had a lot of weight on the build out of our projects. We put that as a 3-tier exit strategy when we presented all of our projects, meaning that we would develop the property, move into a servicing and construction phase, and then sell off units to homeowners. We've backed off on that, and I said we'll talk about this as we do the project updates. But we definitely backed off on that with the volatility that we're experiencing in the market, especially when you're trying to build high quality, healthy and sustainable homes. Between interest rate hikes and the tightening of mortgage rules, just attainability is that much harder. And then, of course, couple that with what I think everybody can appreciate, the supply chain problems that were generated from the war in Ukraine, right down to, of course, COVID affecting, heavily affecting even China right now, which then affects supply chain, which then affects everybody else around the world. So that's been reflected in an enormous increase in costs to build, but costs can be mitigated if you are getting the right price for the home. You can still increase the sale price of a home as everybody's watched prices go up in home values over the last 3 years. It's the volatility that's hard to mitigate. And if the volatility creates a increase in our timeline, that's a direct correlation to a decrease in our profit margins. And that's where we keep our eye on that every day. Quite frankly, we're watching that to see how much the additional time is costing us in rate of return, and what can we do to mitigate that. So we're going to open this up now to Brett on the sales update. I'm going to preface it, and Brett, you're in a tough position because there's not a lot of information, so I don't want to burst the bubble that there's not a lot of impactful information, but I will lead it off by saying I still believe that our Hamilton and Southampton properties, Ingersoll and Goderich, all 4 properties, we're in the right place. It could be that we were in other markets that are much more negatively affected by what we've gone through. So I'll just hand it off to you and look at these current market conditions.
Yeah. So across the board, you can see in Ontario that prices are down. We hit a level at the beginning of 2022 that I think many would agree that was unsustainable. But when the Bank of Canada stepped in and said, okay, we're going to fight inflation and we're going to use the one tool that they have at their disposal, and that is interest rate hikes, it certainly impacted the housing market throughout Ontario significantly. So if we flip the slide, then not just prices, but number of units have come down as well. So, as Doug alluded to, we're in markets that have held okay in terms of pricing, but the volume's down. So even as we show some of these slides showing Saugeen Shores, and that would be our Southampton properties, and we flip to the next slide. In Hamilton, we've seen rebounds there. The difference is the volumes that we saw a year ago compared to now just aren't the same. So we've got I feel relative to the overall market, the markets that the REOT has invested in will come out quite well, but again, the timing of sales now it's just everything's taking that little bit longer to get the prices that we're looking for.
Yeah, I think the key point that you're bringing across when we talk about this in our weekly meetings is the amount of data available right now to give an indication in a smaller market like Southampton. It's just not there. If something comes up for sale, it sells, but nobody's building a larger number of home units. So given that our property is now in the market, and we'll talk about in the updates, it is for sale, and the volume of people looking at it right now, because they're afraid of interest rates, like everybody from the construction owner, the construction company, the building company, development companies, as well as the individual home buyers, are all concerned about where interest rates are going to go. And that's our next indication of that will be, I think it's January 25th. And even if January 25th shows us a decrease in interest rates, it's not going to spark all of a sudden a whole bunch of houses into the market. But it will give us an indication, because a little bit of ease in interest rates will bring a decision that has to be made by people who have to move. So I just want to point out again, I said this a little bit in the opening, that we haven't really had to change our business plan because we've got good markets, and it's this whole market in Saugeen Shores, on the water. It's attractive for retirees. It's attractive for people who are trying to get out of different cities. it's massively underserviced as far as housing goes for the Bruce Nuclear Power Plant and the retrofitting they're doing, as well as future retrofitting for the next series of reactors that they have. And there's a lot of talk about that. That community has to grow, but in order for it to grow, we need somebody to buy our property and start to build. And that's the timeline issue: is, you know, when can we get a builder, you know, excited about buying in? They can certainly sell the units. I you know, Brett, maybe you can qualify that, but you know, units are still selling up there when they come up for sale.
Yeah, the number of days on the market have increased as well, and that's across the board. But certainly, when homes are priced correctly, then they are going to sell. The difficulty that you know, builders have, they've got a finite number that they're working with of cost versus sale price. So they want to make sure that they're not going to have any spikes in construction costs. We've seen price of lumber come down a bit over the past few months, which is good. But some of the other costs are going to go up, and I won't steal Randy's thunder by talking about any of the construction costs, but certainly we've had some interest. It's just they're waiting to know when best to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and then if I look back at Hamilton, it's almost the same comment with the two different types of positioning, with, you know, luxury townhouses versus multi-residential and single-family homes that we have in Southampton. But at the end of the day, we're looking for somebody who wants to build our luxury townhouses and turn around and sell these to, you know, really equates to a small handful of people who want to live on Lake Ontario, looking back at Toronto, being able to easily commute back into Toronto. So there's any number of people who own Toronto properties who are looking to get out of that market, could be coming down there. And again, we'll leave that for John when you update on the progress. But there, you know, good news in Hamilton for us. We just don't know the timeline. Like, we don't know at what point would a builder be excited. So we just got to keep doing the job that we're doing, which is get the word out to as many builders, keep trying to add as much value to the package that we can by clearing out the development concerns, and then and hope that we see a recovery with some interest rates starting to edge down and see some normalities that we can look out in the horizon. So our next screen here is just the general progress of our projects. This has been embedded in, I think, for the last probably 4 or 5 meetings, 4 or 5 quarters that we've been doing these calls. So we have adjusted them. So when you review this, either on video now as you're trying to look at it, or you review it after you receive the link for the video, you want to stop the screen and look at it, or receive it by PDF when usually Mary sends out her follow-up after this meeting. She'll send that out and give you access to these. So if you look at it closely, you'll start to see that we've changed, obviously, the ends of the projects, trying to align them and be, you know, as transparent as we can with the planning we're doing. And there's Southampton, as we've talked about, where servicing right now, and again, Randy will talk about this in more depth, but servicing is being pushed out, and there's some reasons for that. I'll let Randy cover that. It's not that we can't do the servicing right now, it's just that there's no good real reason for it. So with servicing pushed out, that means the ability to construct pushes out, but it doesn't change the fact that, you know, as of this quarter, we can sell this property. It doesn't matter if we sell it to somebody today unserviced or we sell it to them serviced. It's almost a dollar for dollar increase in the value if we service it. So if we can sell the property for $6.6 million, away you go. The builder can service it and away they go. However, if somebody said, no, I only want to buy this property if it's serviced, then the price is $6.6 million plus the cost of servicing, and that's the price. So there's nothing, my point is, there's nothing stopping us from selling a property just because it's sitting there ready to be serviced. And similarly with Hamilton, I'll go down there first. It's got almost the same pattern. Now that we've got, again, letting the cat out of the bag on John's update, but now that we've got an approval, we know that it's, you know, it's got a certainty to it, which means we can push harder to sell that property. So we've adjusted those timelines. Of course, Goderich is sold, so that's all going to be passed. It's all wrapped up as the end of 2022. And Ingersoll, as we will talk about in detail on our updates coming up next, you know, we've had to stretch that out. Supply chain, interest costs, builders delays, you name it, everything is hitting the construction industry for the last 2 years. So again, you'll be able to see this either by stopping the video when you play the video, or you'll be able to see it in the in the PDF version when we send it out for you. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to bring Randy in. We're going to get the project updates going. And as we said, Ingersoll's got the most activity going on. So let's just jump right into Ingersoll.
All right, thanks, Doug. So yeah, jumping into Ingersoll, we continue through our progress of the build out there. A little bit slower than we anticipated, given the delays of supply chain issues and materials and even labor with the COVID effect. We now have 7 sold and closed. We have 2 more that are completed, and we are marketing out to try and get an increased sale price on. We have buyers bound to close on them as of the end of March 2023, but they're giving us the opportunity to resell for them. So we kind of get the best of both worlds there, where we either sell it for more and we can increase our bottom line a little bit, or we have the original sale price when the time comes. As of the end of January, we'll have our 8th unit turned over to a homeowner. And that is the point at which we turn over the condominium corporation to the owner, and they set up their own board. And in the meantime, we just carry on with construction as planned. We all know that construction costs have been kind of runaway over the past several years. We've been doing some research through Stats Canada, and our cost increases are pretty much right in line with the overall market and the increases that everybody's been seeing across the board. So we're pretty comfortable that we're doing the right thing there. We're just continuing to provide a good product with lots of happy homeowners and push to get it closed out as fast as possible.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. So the increase in costs across the board, maybe we just validate those numbers. Like we've seen roughly a 60 to 65% increase in both our hard costs for construction, and then of course it extends our financing because it extends our timeline for construction financing. So we see an increase in overall dollar costs and financing, and then the industry is tracking, give or take, that same amount.
Yeah, so from 2019 to 2022, there's been a 70% increase in the consumer or in the residential price index for construction. From the last 2 years, from 2020 to 2022, it's been over 50%. So industry-wide, it's been, and that's just hard construction costs. So that doesn't even factor in the soft cost increases. We're looking at about that 65% combined between soft and hard costs. So we're doing all right, all things considered.
And given the market, we're doing fine. Yeah, giving rates of return, no one's going to like that. I mean, we're tracking right now at about a minus 5% loss. It's about a 5% loss annualized on the project, given where we were when we sold the units to what our construction costs are now and our obligations to build those houses for the prospective homeowners. Just one other, I guess, question that I think a lot of people would want to know the answer to, and I don't know if you can answer it fully, Randy, but certainly, you get this question at GP meetings all the time. So when it comes to our trades and our costs and our contracts and our, suppliers, what's the feel with them? Are we feeling like they're price gouging us? They don't care? Are we feeling like they're just struggling as well? Are we feeling like we're getting some breaks, from long-term relationships?
Yeah, we're getting some good breaks for sure, in sense that we've had some contractors that have held their pricing from the very start of the project. So here we are 2.5 years in, and we've got some trades that are charging us the exact same amount as they were on the very first house. We have others where it's a case of materials. If they can't buy it any cheaper, they're going to pass that along to us. So that's where we're being hit the hardest, is in those cases where it's a material aspect. And we validate it. We go back and price out the materials ourselves, as opposed to letting them supply, and make sure that in each case they aren't gouging on that increase in cost, and that we can validate that materials actually have gone up that much. So there is really not a great benefit to us purchasing them separately.
And construction guarantees, I was asked this question recently. Don't you have construction guarantees in place? And my layman answer was simply that nobody will sign a construction guarantee in a market like this.
In a market like this, but also in residential construction, it's a smaller business game for all of the individual trades. You're not dealing with as many of the big corporations. If you were talking commercial construction, you would have a hard contract that says no matter when it gets built, here's your cost. and that's it. We're stuck to build it at this cost. Whereas in residential construction, you're dealing with some mom and pop shops, as well as some slightly bigger companies, but you know, they have fluctuating costs and fluctuating price to complete work. So if you build something a year apart, you're going to get a new quote a year away.
Okay, fair enough. So we again, I haven't been watching the chat screen. I don't see anything going up there, but we'll certainly open that up to the chat to talk. I'm sure there'll be questions directly that we're missing, and I appreciate that from our unit holders. So feel free to put those in the chat screen. I'll move on then to Southampton. I'd already referenced that Southampton, you know, we're going to pick and choose when we service it, even though we announced that we would service it. We were pretty excited about the fact that we could go ahead and service it, but go ahead, Randy, and cover off that.
Yeah, in Southampton, we had our tender package out last August, and we accepted a tender in September. We did push to get going right away, but there was a little bit of logistical issues as far as bonding and financing, and all those things have to come together in place. And by the time it hit late October, early November, and the weather started to turn, it didn't really make a lot of sense to incur all the cost of interest and carry a loan through the winter when not a whole lot would happen. Construction in that neck of the woods in the winter is not a good thing to do. Lots of snow and bad weather, so you end up with more lost days than you have construction days. So the benefit of trying to start work in November was not really there as compared to the carrying cost of financing it that early. So at this point, we've made the decision to push servicing off to the spring, which will save us that burn rate over the winter of paying interest expense. And we start fresh in the spring when the weather's good and you can hammer out.
Again, it buys us a little bit of time. I know that's not necessarily what everybody wants to hear, but from a prudent business decision, it makes more sense, first of all, as you pointed out, limit the amount of cash flow going out the door for soft cost interest rates being what they are and interest costs. But additionally, it gives us some time for, you know, the sales side, for the realtor side to dig around and find somebody to buy this property as well. So I think that's a win-win for us to be able to do that. And anecdotally, again, I don't know if maybe a buyer would have come along if we were shoveling the ground, but I think, Brett, you could probably weigh on in this. I don't think there's anybody right now, and I know John and I talk about this every week. We're just not hearing from anybody who's saying, yeah, I want to buy now. Everybody's saying, yeah, I'm just gonna wait until we get past the holidays, wait until we get into to see what's going on in January. Fair statement?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed. I know it's not, I wish we had more dialogue for it. I do, but given that we have the recording, but it's just what's going on in the marketplace. All right, we're going to move on to Hamilton with John. Oh, my apologies. I didn't clean that out from the last presentation. So Hamilton, John.
Thank you, Doug. Like Doug mentioned earlier, we have made some progress with the site. The site is now rezoned totally, and due to the new Bill 23 that came out this year, we no longer have to do a site plan. So really, the site is ready to go to permit. We still have to complete a couple engineering parts to it, which is the environmental approval. We have TerraPax working through that now with the NECP. They're going in January the 17th to complete the drilling. And during that week, they'll be sampling the groundwater, then we'll submit to the ministry again. But other than that, really the site is ready for sale. We do have a permit to demo the site, and that should start next week or so. So we've abandoned the sewer lines, everything's completed and ready to clean the site up, ready for some builder to purchase it and submit for building permit.
That's just to remind folks, John, when we talk about demolition, there's this was a 4 buildings. This is 4 lots that we purchased, you know, and the process to be able to go through and have a rezone, of course, and there's the buildings, the existing buildings on there now. So 2 are going to come down immediately, and then there's the 3rd and 4th, which are would come down second. So
yeah, that's the process. And you know, we took the site originally from commercial site to a residential site, and that's why it has been delayed quite a lot, and that's just due to all the delays in the municipality. But
Yeah,
now
and again, I hate having to keep invoking the COVID blame, but you know, everything did grind to a halt for probably about 16 months as far as trying to get things moving through a municipality. You know, it's no different than sitting in restaurants and wondering why you're getting bad service. Well, it's usually a labor problem. They just don't have enough people anymore to serve everybody. So we're all suffering from that. Just on a small land assembly like this, it's nice to see, you know, come together, and we're going to be able to move some progress. But I just want to also remind, you know, I made the statement in the progress chart where we don't have to do much to the site. There's some valid reasons, of course, demolish the first two buildings. They're just actually a nuisance on the lot right now, and for the cost to demolish, it's, you know, it can go. The one building's a warehouse that someone's still using to facilitate their business, which is, you know, people on site. So there's some built-in there. But the point I'm making is that we need the buyer. We need to have that buyer to line up in order for us to say, let's get this site ready to service. And going back to the Southampton example, is that can be pushed out to save us, first of all, the carrying cost of interest to pay for servicing and the construction costs. And that can be lined up. So we have two properties right now with Southampton and Hamilton, which, you know, we definitely have you know, two great locations, and we can get the right price to run our numbers to meet those performance demands that we want to hit. I think we'll be all very satisfied. We're not going to be as happy as we would have been if we could have just hit all the numbers in the timeframes we presented when we started this and post or pre-COVID. But I think if we get to those numbers now, at this point, our next slide really goes, well, it goes to Godrich, I guess, but Godrich is currently sold, and everybody knows that, so I'll just skip over that. I got a transition point in here. Still encouraging folks to put any questions into the chat if you have questions. So just a quick break for a second here. Just a reminder that May 9th, Tuesday at noon, so the same day of the week that we do our meetings every time, we'll have our next update, as well as we'll have our financials hopefully back from the auditor. Usually we just have drafts by the beginning of May, but we should have them back. We have some deadlines with regards to being a trust that we have to meet. So we've made that very well and clear to BDO to have those done. And that'll be our AGM meeting, which just will be a read through of accepting our financials, and October 10th. So then we'll have the next quarterly meeting on October 10th. So we pulled that June meeting a little bit further ahead so that we could accommodate the AGM. So if you just make sure you put those notes into your calendars, and then also watch for those updates from Mary. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick walkthrough on these financials. I see some questions coming in, so that's great. We'll get to those questions. These are interim statements again, that in consultation with BDO. So our lead on that, one of our trustees, Scott Lockenbauer, takes a lead on it. CPA takes a lead, and also working with our other CPA trustee, Chris, to make sure they're looking at things the right way, and then they take it over to BDO and make sure that they give direction. And then of course our books and records producing the statements that we see on the screen right now. Not a lot happening, of course, with the trust itself. We did make a distribution out of there because we can't sit on cash. I think I've explained this pretty much in every one of our meetings, that, you know, when you purchase a trust, it's a flow through both directions. So when money comes into the trust, we have a certain amount of time to be able to deploy that money into an investment that qualifies and our trustees can sign off on, of which we've put into our materials and proposed into our offering documents. And money goes into those LPs, and then the money can stay in the LPs provided it's being used for advancing the construction projects or adding value to it. But if there's any funds in the LP that are not needed for that, they need to go back to the trust, and that money needs to go back to the unit holders. There's also, in tandem to that, there's the flow of cash back to unit holders, but there's also the accounting side of it. We're not going to see the final accounting till after the year end, and probably well into February before we'll have the numbers for the year end. But what I'm going to show you now is where we're trending to. And the first point is that the trust itself doesn't have a lot of activity. We had some money go into it, money go out of it. It basically stays about the same return of capital numbers, which I'll show on another screen. and it does generate quite a few questions. So I'm not going to try and get too deep into it on here. The first one that we show is the internal loans that go between LPs. Again, this is the same screenshot that we used in our previous presentations. So I would encourage you to take a look at it. It's just excess cash from an LP that was there that was been then applied to use to advance the project in the case, both the LPs have, Southampton and Hamilton have supported the construction financing for Ingersoll to minimize that. So that's detailed out in tract, of course. The balance sheet and cash statement of cash flows for LP1, which is Southampton. You can see we're not sitting on a lot of cash here. We don't need to. There's no reason to go out and, as we've talked about, we don't reason to go out and to take that construction financing loan or anything on there if we're not going to get started or servicing. Now, the minute that we service, we would have to go out and borrow the funds to service, and then the clock starts ticking on that. But right now, there's nothing else aside from basic accounting fees that's happening with our Southampton project. I did, of course, apologize. I'm just going to move some stuff from my own screens here. You hopefully can't see that. So on the Ingersoll project, as I said, we are tracking a loss right now of $336,000. The numbers, just to be clear again, are looking to be about a 5% loss on that project, which would affect the portfolio minimally compared to the size, because if the size of Ingersoll is only about 15% of the size of the whole offering that you've invested in the portfolio. So it works out to about a 5% loss annualized, projected to the end of the project. Currently, just tracking, this goes to the end of November, it's about $336,000. What we've seen is about $100,000 cost increase in building each home, which equates that number of 65% increase in cost in our hard costs and labor costs and lumber costs and in interest on the soft cost side. So this can't get much better. I wish I could say it would. It'll probably get a little bit worse because we're tracking those last 7 houses and we do have to build them, and depending if costs go up or down, it could track to about a $700,000 loss on this project. We are doing everything. I think hopefully we've articulated that to mitigate that as far as our trades and our who we choose to do work, how we choose the timing. And some of the things are just out of our control, as we've mentioned. I know it's a continuous statement of the COVID effect, but there's just some things where we just had to sit in our hands and wait when it came to labor strikes and labor shortages and COVID time offs, shutting down crews when one person tests positive. All of those things add up to approximately a year of delays on top of normal construction, normal things you navigate in the construction time frame. So I don't want to dwell on it. It is what it is, and we are tracking again. We track every penny and we double test everything, and we put a lot of pressure on the team, including putting pressure on Randy's team to make sure we've got clarity on everything. And that's where we stand. We can discuss that in the chat. Hamilton right now, we're sitting on some cash here. We do have some of the short-term loans that go over to the LPs, but in all fairness, we don't really need a lot of cash for Hamilton either. Even the demolition is not going to require a substantial amount of cash. The first 2 demolitions of the first 2 homes. So again, we don't have much activity happening there. Very little left in engineering costs or anything there. And of course, Goderich, which has already been sold and settled to the trust. So I'm not going to go through these. I mentioned it already. I'll just slip through them about the flow through. Although I will just have a quick comment here. I know Mary and Robel and the team here do receive questions from people quite frequently when they receive, especially when they receive statements, but even outside of that, where they look at their book value and they are saying, hey, my book value went down. Yes, your book value goes down when we give you back some of your capital. So if you put $20,000 in and you've received $2,500 back by way of return of capital, your book value then goes down to $17,500. So that's why you see on your statement of book value going down, because money's been sent back to your bank account. If it's not in your bank account because you purchased with an RSP or a TFSA or some other form of registered account, then it could be sitting in your cash position with your custodian account on there. So you'd have to check your custodian statements to look at that. Outside of that, I think I'm just going to switch through here. need to go in there. I'm going to go to our, oops, pardon me, I just skipped a little bit too far, I think. Yeah, I'll go to the Q&A section, and then I'll try to do my best to go back to screens when we need to, based on either prompting from our GP partners or from Robel or the question itself.
Doug, we did have a few questions in the chat screen. The first one was regarding Bill 23, and Randy discussed that because John had already covered off where that impacted us regarding the site plan approval.
Well, for the sake of the recording, let's just, I can see that Randy, you've answered, but maybe just give that answer out so that we can get that captured in there.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, so Bill 23 states that any development of 10 units or less does not need site plan approval. And we've received a letter from the city of Hamilton specifically in regards to our project stating that because of Bill 23, they will no longer require site plan approval, just a building permit to proceed with that project.
Right, so in general, Bill 23 is not affecting the larger projects the same way as a smaller one, so.
No, we won't see much benefit on the larger projects. The only reason being we're past the stages where Bill 23 would impact them. Conservation Authority changes within Bill 23 would have impacted the earlier parts of the Southampton project, but we've already dealt with all of that stuff and it's already done and behind us. So no more impact there on that one.
I see a question about how many units have we sold or how many sites have we sold in Southampton. I see the answer there from Randy. So I think the clarity on that, just for sake of all the unit holders, is that we did circulate the lots for interest from our unit holders. So we do have a list of people who are interested in the lots themselves, if indeed we're going to move forward to construction. There was no commitment on those. There was no deposits. It's just an expression of interest, and that just falls in line with our right of first refusal to all of our unit holders. You know, if for some reason we have a construction company on this call right now and you're a unit holder and you're like, hey, I want to buy that property, well, you can buy the whole property. You have the right to purchase ahead of somebody else who's offering the same price or less. So that's, I think maybe that answers that.
Yeah, two more things to note on that as well. Technically, we actually can't sell individual lots because they don't exist yet. We haven't finalized the plan of subdivision yet. We don't need to finalize it in order to service it. Right now, we're under a pre-servicing contract, which means the town will allow us to move forward with servicing while we finalize that plan of subdivision. So those lots haven't yet legally been created. They're sitting there ready and approved to be created, subject to a little bit of surveying and minor legal work in the background. So technically we couldn't sell them off even if we wanted to. We could only sell the site as a whole because that's all that exists right now.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. It's a good point, and that's why I emphasize, even if we were circulating it out to people, we're just taking expressions of interest, not trying to sell off the lots. And we need that data. Like if we had every unit holder and every contact of ours who could tell us right now what they're feeling, their gut feeling is that they would want to buy a lot in Southampton or an executive townhouse in Hamilton, that helps us to feed the information back to potential builders and buyers who may be hesitating, going, well, is there really a market demand for this product in these communities? I'm not familiar with Southampton, or I don't know who's moving into Hamilton, and statistically we know there's market there. So I'll move on from that. I see a question here about distributions. I think I can answer that one. So it's coming from Norma there. So we did a cash distribution because of the flow through again with Godrich. Godrich monies came up. They go back to the project is finished. First of all, the security is gone. Once the security is gone, that money has to go back to the trust. It can't just go anywhere else. So once the money sat in the trust, it had to be distributed out. So everybody got a distribution of cash back in the third quarter of 2022. At this point, there is no excess cash in any project that's not being used to further development process or construction in the case of Ingersoll. So we don't have any distributions right at this moment or foreseeably into the next quarter with the delays that we've described. But I do want to point out that the cash distribution part is slightly different than the taxation part. And this is something that's going to come up over the next little while, because we did send a notice out saying that any tax slips that you would be getting, they'd be going out in the next week or so. Now that we've done some of the preliminary numbers from the accounting on Ingersoll and the cash distributions that we had for Goderich, the profits that we generate in Goderich, those two things from the trust level will wash each other out. So you've received your cash, but you're not going to pay any tax on it, which is a small good news story. I realize that it's not, saying that there's a loss in one project doesn't make up for expectations of hoping that there's profits, but you will not receive a tax slip for the trust income you've already received in 2022. So in 2022, you received some of your capital back plus some income from the Goderich property, and you're not going to have a tax slip or taxation on that. We will send a letter to everybody to describe that and give you the breakdown, but that was just verified before we got on this call today. So once again, that I apologize. It doesn't make up for projects that are not progressing or succeeding the way we want to. But anytime we can tell somebody they're going to not pay tax, I feel good about that. So do we have any other questions I'm missing here? I'm not seeing anything. All right, well, maybe if there's any other comments.
So Doug, just to confirm, for those who try to get their taxes in as early as possible, when do you think the notice regarding that would go out?
We should be able to send that
everyone?
out next week.
Awesome.
So yeah, because the verification was just, the call was literally at 9:30 a.m. today on that. And yeah, so we'll be able to send that notice out. Probably within this follow-up for this meeting, Brett will include a notation in this follow-up, and to give people that alert, but then they'll receive some kind of a summary statement for the year end that shows their tax position of being 0. So yeah. All right, is there any other comments, gentlemen?
We just had a question come in from Davide. Brett might be able to field that one.
The entire site for Hamilton is listed on MLS currently. The Hamilton site is not. So we'll, we've had members of the REOT express interest on the individual units, but we have not had an offer for either of those sites yet.
Yeah, just for clarity, like we actually have a list of people who want to buy the Hamilton units. It's not, I don't think it's extensive, but there are definitely people showing interest in buying the end units. But we have not solicited or really attracted a buyer who would come in as a builder and build those out to do that. And just for clarity, we would happily connect those parties. If somebody came in and said, "Oh, I want to build it, but can you make sure I'm, getting the word out to buy these units?" Well, we've already done that, so we would simply hand over that data to the builder who would be expressing interest.
Yep.
So thank you for that. Is there any other questions I missed? Because it is difficult to look at all these screens at once.
I haven't seen any more.
All right, thaness, Randy.
I think it was
All
just
right,
for
well,
Bell
with
saying
that-
thank you to everyone.
Oh, excellent. And thank you for the other comments that were there. All right, so we'll reconvene on May 9th. In the interim, as I've said many times, watch for the emails. Make sure that if you're not getting the link to the videos or link to the portal or anything that's not working for you, just send an email back to Mary and she'll connect it to the right party. If you have questions specific to your accounts and returns, do give consideration that sometimes the answers are actually from the custodian and not necessarily from the trust itself. And as we've told people over the past, when it comes down to like questions about tax and trying to figure out how to deal with things, there's certainly qualified dealing rep with our in-house fellow. You probably dealt with Jeff May previously on things. He's available for that too, if it's to do with how to maybe do things in your own personal situation. And yeah, so we'll see you then. And thank you all for joining us today.
Just a quick response there. Oh yeah, John answered it in the chat. Norma asked how many units in Hamilton, and there's 10.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay. Goodbye, all. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.